welcome back. So, now we are moving into the 8th lecture of this course, and recently we discussed about the role of drivers in making a supply chain strategic. So, now moving further into the discussion of supply chain strategy, we will see that how the first process of the supply chain strategy management, that we need to understand the demand and supply uncertainties. And you see, the demand and supply uncertainties are related to variety of things. Now, some of the uncertainties which are there from the demand side in a supply chain, let us see. A customer can vary the quantities demanded. Now, we see in the last discussion that how during a particular time of the day the demand of food products may increase, demand of seats in restaurant may increase, how the demand of cinema tickets on a weekend show may increase. So, quantity of products required at a particular time may increase or decrease. So, you have uncertainties related to range of quantity increases, and as this range of quantity increase is increased or decreased by the customer, the implied demand uncertainty as a result of that is that wide range of quantity implies that greater variance in demand. Means if you have large number of SKUs, so in that case this range of quantity will create further higher variance in the demand uncertainty. So, that is one very important thing, and nowadays you can see in lot of product categories the uncertainty related to quantities are there. And particularly if I take you to the side of humanitarian supply chain, in that particular supply chain you have huge amount of uncertainty with respect to quantities. So, quantity changes, and this quantity changes is even more severe when you have wide variety of products to be offered in your supply chain. Then you customer need is also with respect to lead time. Now, customers are continuously expecting that lead time when I order the product and when I receive the product, that difference, that time gap is known as lead time. The time between you order and you receive the product, that time is known as lead time. Now, there was a time 20 years, 30 years back when I used to book a Bajaj scooter and I used to get deliveries after 4 years or 5 years or 6 years of that time. But nowadays what is expected? I should have money in my pocket and I should walk to a retailer's shop and immediately I must get the product. So, now we are continuously expecting reduced lead times. I am not interested in waiting for my product, and this particular aspect created a landmark change in the supply chain management of Dell computers. Before that, Dell was taking sufficient lead time of around 2 to 3 weeks to deliver their products, but as Dell could understand it at a very appropriate time that now customers are not going to wait for the products, and immediately they changed their supply chain and went to the retail market. So, lead time is continuously decreasing, and now as a result of that, when customers are expecting low lead times, there is less time to react for the orders. Today I am giving the order and you have 1 day or even less than 1 day to fulfill my requirement. So, you do not have much time and you need to develop the capabilities in your supply chain. We all are looking a certain degree of responsiveness in my supply chain, and therefore, this is creating another kind of you can say a stress in the supply chain that you do not have enough time to react or to understand or to satisfy the customer requirement. You have to do every requirement fulfillment on war footage. Then variety of products required are continuously increasing. You can feel in your last 10 years of period or 15 years of period that how the variants of a products are increasing, because we all are living in marketing era. This is the era of marketing, and in the era of marketing we say the customer is king, and we are going to fulfill each minor requirements of the customer, and therefore we are creating continuously more and more variants of the products. So, the variety of products are increasing, and this increased variety of products are creating another kind of pressure, because when you have more number of SKUs, stock keeping units, you have so many varieties of soaps, you have so many varieties, flavors, pack sizes of biscuits, you have so many varieties of namkeens. So, all these things are variety of products that is increasing, and then you need to understand that demand per product is becoming more disaggregated. So, that is also a challenge to the supply chain, and you need to, when I am talking in a strategic manner, you need to understand that how to fulfill this disaggregated demand, because for each small product you need to develop the supply chain solutions. Then number of channels are also increasing. Earlier we used to have simple brick and mortar type of supply chains, but nowadays you have small kirana shops, you have big malls, and then you have e-supply chains also. So, there are different types of channels through which through which companies are reaching to the customer. They are following the conventional wholesaler, retailer and customer model. They are following directly from manufacturer to big retailers, those who are the organized retailers, and then to the customer. And then there are companies directly from manufacturer to customer. So, number of channels are continuously increasing, and customers has option, all the customers can go for different types of channels. So, these are also creating a type of pressure on the supply chain that you need to maintain, you need to manage the multiple channels which are available in the market. So, what is happening? Each channel like e-supply chain, the big malls and the small kirana shops, the overall demand of the product, overall demand of the supply chain is now distributed over these different channels. So, you need to handle all these channels, because your overall demand is now disaggregated over more number of channels. So, as you evolve more number of channels, you lose economies of scale. So, that is another challenge, because you have x number of customers total, and now x number of customers are distributed over 3 different type of channels. So, each channel will take care of, if it is uniform distribution, x by 3 and x by 3 number of customers. So, that total customer demand is now disaggregated to more number of channels. So, obviously you lose some of the efficiency in managing the different number of channels. Then you have another important area from the customer, that innovation. Customers continuously expect the innovative products, and as we all can observe, the rate of innovation is continuously increasing. The new products are coming at a much faster rate, and we had a time when we used to have black and white TVs, and black and white TVs remain into the market for more than 3 decades in Indian market I am talking. But after 1980s, when color television came to Indian market, we are seeing in last 35-36 years a very fast change in the color TV technology. You had variety of color TVs where CRTs were there, then after that we have LCDs, LEDs, high definition, full HD, then TV with Wi-Fi, smart TVs. So, in last 35-36 years you can see the rate of innovation in color TV technology, and it is not only limited to color TV technology. You can see in the information technology, in the area of your mobile communication, in the area of automobile, in the area of your household appliances, everywhere you talk you will see that rate of innovation is continuously increasing, and this rate of innovation is putting another pressure because the life of the product is not much, and as a result of that new products tend to have more uncertain demand. When a product has passed or when the product has a longer maturity cycle, this is not a class of marketing. So, I will not go in much detail, but you can understand or you should know that this is a generic kind of product life cycle. We normally abbreviate it as PLC, product life cycle. On x axis we have time and on y axis we have volume. Earlier in previous time we used to have a sufficiently long maturity period where during this period demand was almost very certain, it was almost static kind of demand. But nowadays because of this innovation you will not find a longer maturity period. A product comes and reaches to a particular level and immediately declines because a new product comes into the market. So, this is the earlier time and this is the present time, and as a result of that you have more uncertainties in handling the demand of new products, that how a new product will feature into the market. You have the example of iPhone 5, iPhone 6 and iPhone 7. So, Apple is continuously introducing new iPhones into the market, but we all know the response of the market towards iPhone 7 is not as good as it was for iPhone 5 and iPhone 6. So, you cannot take decisions on the basis of past data. You need to see that each new product will come with its own uncertainties, and this is happening because of rate of innovation, and customers are becoming lover of innovative products, but more innovative products are putting a different type of pressure on the supply chain uncertainties, that you have uncertainty related to demand of the new innovative products. Then you have expectations from the customer about increased service level. We want, as soon as products demand come to my mind, as soon as I walk into a shop, a retailer's place, I must get the product immediately. So, I want a very high level of service for my expectations. Now, because of this high level of service requirement, the companies, the supply chain now has to handle unusual increase in demand. There is all of a sudden a very high increase in demand, and all the customers are expecting same high level of service level, and therefore it again becomes a challenge for the supply chain, that how do we handle that sudden increase in demand and all the customers are expecting same level of service, because they all are ready to pay extra premium, they all are ready to pay the additional cost for getting the higher service levels, but you have limitation of supply chains. So, all these things, all these customer needs ranging from quantities to the service level, all these things are creating different type of implied demand uncertainty, and these implied demand uncertainty is to be handled for developing a proper supply chain strategy. So, now moving further into this, because of this implied demand uncertainty, now you can understand from the spectrum of this implied demand uncertainty that on this side you have a very predictable supply and demand, and this is like my earlier PLC, the previous PLCs. Some of the products, like I take the example of salt, the common salt, it is still like earlier PLC. So, you have a very certain demand and supply of this type of product. So, it is coming on this side of this implied demand uncertainty, where the implied demand uncertainty is very low or almost absent. On this side of the spectrum, the implied demand uncertainty is almost absent. Now, coming to this side of the spectrum, to the right side of the spectrum, here you have very high level of uncertainty in the supply and demand, like as I mentioned about i7, iPhone 7, and it is a new phone just launched into the market, and this product has a very high level of uncertainty that how customers will respond to this type of new product, and therefore, I have placed this i7 to the right side of this spectrum. So, now you have these two extremes, where on the left you have no uncertainty, suppliers are also having a very routine kind of demand, and they are habitual, they have developed a good infrastructure to meet that kind of demand. Here you do not know what type of demand it will be. So, all the suppliers are in a state of confusion that should we produce large volume, should we produce low volumes. If we produce large volume and customers do not respond, that you have huge inventories. If you do not produce in large volumes and customers are also expecting high service level, they want products immediately, i7 is launched today and I want today the product, but since I am very much cost conscious, so I have not stored enough inventory of i7. So, most of the customers will not be happy because I am not able to provide the required service level. So, you have lot of challenges on this side of this spectrum, where you see that all these products will have to face and therefore, we will talk of flexible supply chain, that how initially you need to have a very responsive supply chain, a flexible supply chain, so that you can make changes as per the requirement of your uncertainties. Then somewhere in the center, not exactly in the center, but somewhere in the center place of this spectrum, you have somewhat certainty, somewhat uncertainty, you have a balance type of place, where you have some kind of predictable supply and uncertain demand, or uncertain supply and predictable demand, or somewhat uncertain supply and demand. So, you have possible combination of uncertainties and predictabilities of supplies and demand, and therefore, some routine kind of models, like you take the example of Scorpio, you take the example of Alto, you take the example of WagonR, these types of, you take the example of CD100 motorcycle of Hero, these types of examples can fit in at this type of place, where you have some existing routine kind of model which is already popular in the market. So, that product will fit in into this place. So, where you have a very predictable supply and demand, obviously you cannot make huge profits. Where you have very unpredictable situations, either you can make huge profits or you will go down because of not able to achieve the desired level of because not able to answer the desired level of uncertainties. But here in this case, in the central location, where you have some uncertainties in your supply chain, maybe either because of supply side or because of demand side, but this is a position which is very hard earned position, because in current environment of innovation where PLCs are continuously shrinking, even in this stage you are able to maintain a longer PLC for these products, and then only this type of positioning is possible for your products. So, it requires a very integrated effort from all the functional area, not only from the supply chain, but from the product development team, from the marketing team, from the distributors point of view, from the after sales service point of view, all those who are involved in delivering value to the customer, their important role is there to get this position on this implied demand uncertainty spectrum. After understanding the concept of this implied demand uncertainty, you can see that as a result of some of the researches, when you have low implied demand uncertainty, your product margins are low, as we saw just now in the case of salt. You have low product margin because it was positioned on the left side of this implied demand uncertainty spectrum. When you have high implied demand uncertainty, your product margins can be very high, as evident in the case of I7, which is positioned on the extreme right side of the implied demand uncertainty spectrum. The average forecasting error is very low, as low as of 10% in case of low implied demand uncertainty. But if you are positioned on the right side of this spectrum, your forecasting errors can be as high as 40% to 100%. So, that is very unfortunate. Just to quote you some data, when in Bombay, now Mumbai, this Bandra-Worli sea link was conceived. So, the initial forecast for that Bandra-Worli sea link was about 12 lakh cars per day, 12 lakh cars per day. But if I give you the present uses, it is just 45,000 cars per day. So, that is the type of errors which are possible in case of high implied uncertainty products. So, this is a kind of, I can say, blunder in calculation or in the forecasting, but it is always possible when you are dealing with a product having very high implied uncertainty. Then stock outs, the number of times products goes out of stock and a customer wants that product. So, in case of low implied demand uncertainty products, it is just 1 to 2%, very low. Most of the time, means the opposite of this is you are able to achieve 98 to 99% of service level, a very high service level you are achieving in case of low implied uncertainty products. But in case of high implied uncertainty products, your stock out rate is 10% to 40%. It means your service level can decrease as low as up to 60%, as low as up to 60% in case of high implied uncertainty. And if the service level is 60%, you can correspondingly understand the customer satisfaction level, means out of 100 times only 60 times customers get the products, 40 times they are not able to get the product when they are visiting the retailer, or retailer is visiting the wholesaler, or wholesaler is visiting the manufacturer. So, that is the reason of low customer satisfaction in case of a new product, because of this low service levels. Then because of forecasting errors and because you are piling up the inventories, you need to clear those inventories, and end of season marking down pricing is nowadays we see very often. So, in case of low implied uncertainty, you hardly see this type of activity. So, it is almost zero. You never find any kind of end of season sale on products like say salt or grocery items or wheat items. There is no such concept, but you find lot of end of season sales for garments, for shoes and for so many other products because of forecasting errors and because of these reasons you are piling up inventories. So, 10 to 15%, 25% of the time you have this type of marking down of the prices. So, you can see the only thing which is favoring the high implied uncertainty is the high product margin, but you have correspondingly very high risk of forecasting error, you have very low service level of 60% and you also can go up to 25% of end of season marking down. So, all these things are big challenge for high implied uncertainty, but it is almost unavoidable. The reason is because whenever you are launching a new product, the implied uncertainty is always very high, and since it is the time of innovation, it is the time of shrinking PLCs. So, to remain into the market, to remain competitive into the market, you have to be launching new products, but you have to be very careful. And now it is very important to understand that the data analytics can help us to change these figures. These figures of forecasting error can be reduced from 40% to 10% or 15% if I use proper forecasting methods. The more adaptive forecasting methods, if I use, probably I can reduce the forecasting errors. If I can reduce the forecasting errors, both these things, the stock out rates and the marking down will also be reduced, because when I am able to correctly forecast, so I will stock only that much product with me, and this correspondingly will help me to achieve higher service levels and to reduce my marking downs. So, both these things are actually related with the forecasting errors, and with the help of data analytics, with the help of adaptive forecasting, I will be able to somehow reduce this value of 40% to 15 or 20%. So, that is one big advantage which I am going to have with the help of data analytics into the supply chain management. Now, once we understood the uncertainties related to demand and supply in my supply chain, the next important point is to understand the supply chain, that how my supply chain is going to answer these uncertainties, how I am going to fulfill the gaps which are there in my supply chain, and that is the second step in developing the supply chain strategy canvas. So, now let us see that how does the firm best meet the demand, what are the different typical you can say coping mechanism available with the firm through which firm is able to meet its demand. Like in the class of drivers, we discussed that pricing is one such mechanism through which firm can meet the demand and supply. Then the dimensions which are describing the supply chain and how it is a responsive supply chain, those dimensions, whether it is through pricing, whether it is through facilities, whether it is through distribution, whether it is through inventory, etc. And supply chain responsive ability to respond wide range of quantities, the number of products, the how much you are demanding. So, how my supply chain is responding to that. Then reduce lead times, then variety of products, then ability to innovate new products continuously and to meet a very high service level. So, I need to see that how my supply chain is able to answer all these abilities which we require from the step 1 of our strategy development process. Now, it is also very important to understand that to achieve a particular level of responsiveness, there is a cost associated to that. When you want to achieve a particular level of responsiveness, you need to invest into developing the supply chain capability. So, there is a cost associated to develop the particular level of responsiveness. Efficiency, we have already discussed that it is inversely proportional to the cost of making and delivering the product to the customer. And as we just discussed, that increasing responsiveness results in higher cost and it lowers the efficiency of the supply chain. So, efficiency and responsiveness are somehow inversely related to each other. And now we will see that to develop a strategic fit of the supply chain, we need to put the supply chain capabilities on the spectrum of implied demand uncertainty. So, today we close our discussion at this point, and in our next lecture we will see that how do we map the supply chain on the responsiveness spectrum, that and later on we will see that how this responsiveness spectrum is embedded in that implied demand uncertainty. So, thank you very much for this 8th session of our supply chain analytics course.